Welcome to this episode of the AEC Engineering and Technology Podcast, a podcast dedicated to helping engineering professionals find the tools that fit their needs. Today, I'll be talking with Marcel Poser, CEO and co-founder of Screening Eagle Technologies, about the importance of protecting our built world and the role data and digital transformation play in that process. Okay, let's jump into today's episode. All right, welcome. It's now time for our conversation of the week with Marcel Poser, CEO and co-founder of Screening Eagle Technologies. Marcel, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you on.
Hey, Nick, how are you?
Excellent. Excellent as always when we're recording another episode of AEC Tech here. So a pleasure to get together with you. And I guess we'll start, Marcel. What can you tell our listeners about yourself and what you do on a daily basis?
Sure, pleasure to do so. So I'm a civil engineer by training. Been educated both in Switzerland and in the US, in Austin, Texas. Passionate about the built world, passionate about the technology. Was fortunate enough that over the last 20 years I could do different things from construction over design, over gaming companies, over media. And in the last couple of years, really been heads down together with the team to build Screening Eagle Technologies, which is really kind of a software first, technology first proposition to the built world, and pieces of technologies and solution that really help to protect, to inspect, and maintain all the built world around us.
Wonderful. And it's great to have that perspective, right? As somebody who's come from a number of different industries and is, as we were talking about a little bit earlier, right, an international traveler, not necessarily based in the US, right? So great to have that different perspective here on the show. So then, Marcel, can you tell us a little bit more about why you think it's important that the built world be protected?
Sure. Look, if you look at the built world all around us, I mean, we're using it every day, being it roads, trains. Maybe trains not that popular in the US, but in the rest of the world. Airports, buildings, bridges, tunnels. There is no life as we know it without the built environment or without the built world around us. And if you look at the value of the built world, we're talking order of magnitude $500 trillion. That's the value of all the buildings, tunnel, bridges around the world. And that's 10x the value of all the stock exchange listed companies all around the world. So it's the biggest asset class in the world. And without the built world, as I mentioned, there's no society as we know it. It's important for the people. It's important for the economy. And as maybe we can talk as well a little bit later, it's also a very important piece for a sustainable future of humanity. And that's what we are passionate about, to protect that built world. I think the society deserves safety of the built world. We don't want to see failures of bridges and failures of buildings. The society, the people deserve quality built world. We want roads that functions, bridges that are, without potholes and missing handrails and all these things. We want buildings without leakages and so on and so forth. So quality of the built world is the other important piece. And as mentioned, sustainability as a whole and longevity of the built world is a very, very essential piece for humanity and for all of us.
Exactly. And, and most people, if you talk to them, right, being in the civil engineering profession, we're well aware of the presence of the built world, right? But you talk to people who go over bridges or use parking garages, right? They just take for granted what's under their feet. But that's the way it should be. They shouldn't have to think twice of, is a piece of concrete going to spall and, hit me in the head, right? That's something that should not even be considered. And the safety really should be taken for granted. And Marcel, you did touch on an interesting piece, sustainability. Could you talk a little bit about what role climate change plays in infrastructure facilities?
Look, I think there's two elements to it. On one hand, climate change puts additional stress on the built world and on infrastructure and on buildings. I mean, heat waves, cold waves, hurricanes, maybe forces and environmental impacts the structures have not been designed for. I think this is one piece that we're seeing. which leads, again, to more stress, maybe faster aging of structures. I think that's one part of the equation. The other part of the equation is the built world is the biggest CO2 polluter. The built world contributes roughly 40% of global carbon emissions, followed by probably industrial with maybe 30%, transportation 20%. So all of transportation globally is only half of what the built world contributes. And then there's probably a 10% of other smaller pieces. So 40% is built world. And if you look at built world, there's two elements to it. One is so-called operational carbon. So that's basically energy, heating, cooling of structures, which is, on a global scale, 25%, and then 15% is so-called embodied carbon, which is basically all the carbon required for mining materials, producing products, shipping then products to construction site, construction process, erecting a building, all the way then to decommissioning a structure. So that's 15% of global carbon emission is that so-called embodied carbon. And that, especially that embodied carbon, is typically something that has been forgotten a little bit. I mean, there was a lot of focus, I would say, the last 5 to 10 years on the operational carbon, greening the energy grids and, light efficient or energy efficient bulbs and air conditioners that are more energy efficient, solar panels on the roof for green energy. But what has been forgotten is really that embodied carbon piece. And really the way to tackle that is to, and this takes me back to one of my first points, longevity of the built world. The longer we can operate structures, the smaller the embodied carbon footprint. So if we can operate the building for 80 years instead of 50 years, that is a massive, massive embodied or reduced embodied carbon impact, and so on. So there is a change of mindset in many parts of the world where property developers, engineering companies are more and more incentivized to refurbish existing structures and give them a new use without just knocking them down and rebuilding them. And I think this absolutely goes in the right direction. I mean, it's not only true for the built world, obviously. Humanity very much went down a path and started to be extremely wasteful. We buy a new phone every year, and we buy clothes every 6-9 months, and new gadgets all the time. I was recently at the conference, and they said the average lifetime of all produced products is like 6 months before it ending up being waste. And unfortunately, over recent years, we had as well a little bit that methodology in the built world where we build something, we assume it lasts forever without any maintenance, and then surprise, surprise, 30, 40 years later, it's in their condition and you need to knock it down and rebuilding it, and that's just not sustainable. So it's really an important piece that we look at the built world as something that needs longevity. You can do a little bit of human analogy there. We humans all want to live longer. To do that, we live healthy, we do fitness, we get, do the right thing to have a long life. And that's exactly the mindset we need as well for the whole built environment. It's absolutely unsustainable to build for short term and knock things down. And, especially if you look in Europe, but also in the US, a lot of the structures getting to an age 60, 70, 80, 100 years old, where we need to start thinking and start to take actions that we can infuse, another couple of decades to some of these structures. Because rebuilding everything that we have, in addition to all the new build we have to do because of population growth and whatnot, that will just not allow us to get to a net zero or to a sustainable condition as a civilization. So that was kind of the third point, safety, quality, longevity of structures. That's really what's essential for a sustainable future and for a resilient future as well for humanity and for the built world.
Absolutely. And, there has been a lot of talk about the environment and sustainability in new design, right? You can see all over platforms like LinkedIn, right? Reducing carbon, both embodied as you talked about, but more on the operational side. But that's on the new design, right? But we're talking here today about, the maintenance and restoration of of existing assets and existing portfolios. And I think where the discussion usually ends is, well, we're doing repairs and maintenance and we're not building new, therefore we're doing our part, right? But there is more to it, as you said. And like we both know, right, the exploding population growth of the world and a shortage of the people to actually do what needs to be done to repair and maintain facilities and assets is a problem, right? So let's talk a little bit about what some of the things that Screening Eagle is doing to help protect the built environment, right? So digital inspection, digital design has become a huge topic over the past couple of years, right? And you're no stranger to it. So where is Screening Eagle's priorities lying in this conversation of how do we do things better? How do we do things faster? How do we do things safer?
Look, I think there are two major direct stakeholders, I would say. One are, the service professionals, inspectors, engineers, service providers. And the challenge there is often to find qualified personnel. It's oftentimes easier to drive an Uber in an air-conditioned car and listen to music than crawl around on a construction site or an old building and do inspection work. So I think there is the need to make that industry more attractive again to a younger audience, to a younger generation. Then there is the need to connect that industry, so to make experts more efficient, meaning that maybe you have one expert and he has 10 field technicians, and because they're digitally and real time connected, the whole group becomes much more efficient, where the technicians know what to do, and if they come across something special, they can dial in an expert in real time and be efficient in dealing with unforeseen events. So connectivity, collaboration is a very important piece. And then overall, just taking much better care of how the collected data is maintained and managed. We see, unfortunately, way too often that a lot of data is being collected and then gets lost on a USB stick, on a hard drive somewhere. And 6-12 months down the road, people look for data. They don't find the data anymore. So data management and creating well-managed data lakes is a very important piece. And this is really sort of our proposition to the whole play, right? The software first, the digital first approach, an iPad first approach. So addressing also the young generation, right? That's something that they use every day, that they can also do that at work. And it's not some old black box with a Nokia screen on it that no young person wants to deal with. But then really a holistic end-to-end data management and data visualization play, which is on one hand intuitive, on the other hand allows you to easily collaborate on real time, and really have a very, very solid data lake and data collection piece where it's very easy to retrieve historical data and get that data up again as and when needed. So I would say these are sort of our main proposition to the service industry. So make people more productive and more connected. I think you could summarize it on that front with a software first proposition. Then on the other hand, the most important stakeholder ultimately are the asset owners. They pay all our bills. They pay the bills of the service professionals, of the engineers, and ultimately all our bills. There, at the end of the day, the value creation comes by increasing the maintenance ROI, that they know when to spend money where most efficiently. And that, again, is a data play. Today, very oftentimes, asset owners don't know the conditions of their asset. They don't know where the data sits. They don't have any dashboards for decision-making to when and how to deploy capital on maintenance. So focusing on maintenance ROI for asset owner, I think, is a key piece there, which ultimately increases the value of an asset. An asset that is well maintained is valued much more than an asset that is not well maintained. So actually, by doing smart maintenance, you create value. You create value in the long run. But for this, we need to have a data-driven mindset. We need to provide data to asset owners in a way so that they can take smart decisions. And that's a software play, that's a data play. And this is really sort of our focus area. With the end goal, obviously, as mentioned at the beginning, at the end, we need to do all of that for all of us, for all of civilization, to have a healthy built world, healthy infrastructure, healthy building that are safe, that are of high quality, and are there for the long term, right?
Absolutely. And, your first comment about the service professionals, right? That's something, I've had a number of conversations with individuals and other engineers about, where there are certain tasks, right? Where, think about how medicine has handled this, and a very, very wise individual taught me this, is the way medicine is handled, right? The delegation of responsibilities, say from a doctor down to a physician's assistant, down to the different levels of classification of nurses, right? And making best use of the skill sets that you have. So an engineer, for example, doesn't need to be, let's say, dumping photos into a report, or always needing to get in CAD to draw plans, right? There are better uses of their time. And when that hierarchy and, efficiency of tasks is really handled, right? And we both know that digital inspection and remote collaboration have a lot to do with that. Then we're not only making our people more efficient, right? But they have a better say in what they want to do, which ends up, right, better retention, happier employees, and just a better output for the asset owners. And for the asset owners, it's all about education. Like you said, there is a play where, for example, some municipalities or cities will require mandated inspections of facades or parking structures or other concrete structures. But with that, if handled correctly over time, right, you're spending less dollars on, let's say, maintenance than you would be a full-blown repair had those issues not being taken care of sooner, right? So it's a win-win situation, but a lot of it from both the professional side and their use of technology, and then the asset owners and their use of the output is really about education, right? So like you said, there's a lot of potential out there. It's just making sure people understand.
And a lot of it has to do as well with the right language that the different stakeholders understand. The asset owner doesn't understand what a defect is, what spalling is, but the asset owner understands money and monetary language, right? And I think that's education, training, communication, that an engineer can communicate things maybe in a monetary sense to an asset owner, and not in numbers of defects and corrosion and spalling, which most asset owners don't know what to do with, right? So I think that's another important piece. I mean, I think we saw this with the incident in Miami, for example, where inspection works were done, but maybe the asset owners or the committee handling it didn't pay attention to it, or didn't know what to do with it, or maybe were reluctant to spend the money with it. But it's always difficult if the pitch to the asset owner is, oh, well, you need to spend money to do something. I think a lot of this really can be turned around, and actually you can show someone that spending money actually increases value of your asset, right? Which is a completely different conversation. Then it's an investment into something that creates value, not just an expense, which everyone is shy of doing, right? So I think that's maybe something where the service and engineering community needs to beef up their vocabulary, to talk more value proposition as well, and the real impact, the monetary impact certain measures have, respectively the negative impacts things have if you don't do it, right? So as you say, it's training, it's education, it's communication, that it's absolutely essential to achieve at the end what we all want to achieve is a healthy built world, right?
Exactly. And speaking the other party's language, in this case, the asset owners, right, is critical. And from a monetary side, but let's also talk about safety, right? If you can show, and instead of, right, you've seen them, the traditional engineering 2D reports, right? They serve their purpose, but maybe aren't always the best way to communicate with asset owners what's going on with their structure. And what's really exciting in the kind of the digital world we're living in, right, is the advent of 360 photography, 3D models, right, dashboards, better ways to display the findings in a way that makes sense to the asset owner or the end user. So Marcel, could you talk a little bit more in detail? Like, what role is data playing in protecting the built world?
Look, ultimately, it's all a data play. Ultimately, that's what it is. You need data over time, in simple terms, so that you can detect changes over time, so that you can go back in time and make sure, oh, this was always here, but it doesn't get worse, or oh no, this was not here 2 or 3 years ago, but it's here now. So data is the key piece, but the important piece is there to have consistent data and structured data, right? Just having a lot of data that is unstructured, that doesn't take you anywhere. So you need tag data, you need location reference data, you need valuable data, and to really make sense of it all. And a lot of our products are exactly focused on this, right? Geo-referencing data points to specific points on buildings, on structures, that if you go back, it's not just some photo somewhere where you need to guess where it has been taken, but it's clearly referenced to a point and say, yes, I'm looking at the right column, and I'm at the right floor, and I'm looking at the right thing. So data important, but it needs to be structured data. It needs to be well-tagged data and well-maintained data so that you can really extract value, right? That's ultimately what it's all about. And the good news is there with the right digital workflows, you can actually be more productive and collect higher quality data than with an unstructured analog workflow, right? That's really the good news. So you can actually have the best of both worlds. You can be more productive and produce better data at the same time. Obviously, that's a change process, and that's something humans are oftentimes not particularly good at. We're very good to do what we have always been doing. So a big piece of our work is as well change management and changing how things are done and should be done, and advocating new practices and taking people onto a journey of change on how things have to be done to do things in a sustainable way. So it's not only about technology, but it's also about educating and advocating new ways of doing things. And that's the fun part of the project, or of the project of work, if you wish. But oftentimes this is also the hard part of it, where people see it, they would need to do it differently, but they're resistant to change because it's counterintuitive maybe to them to do things differently compared to what they have been doing for 10 or 20 years. And a lot of people fear change. That's true as well. The other piece as well, sometimes change means that the people you talk to, it may impact their work and it may impact their position in an organization. Change is something you need to involve all the stakeholders to be able to implement new procedures, new ways of doing things. So it's really a play of technology, software first, digital collaboration, with a good doses of education and change management. I think this is what the industry needs. And we see in many parts of the world great progress on what we're doing, authorities changing specification, adapting new ways of doing it. Some regions are faster, some regions are slower, but inevitably it has to happen everywhere, because there is simply no other way than paying more attention to maintaining assets and keeping assets healthy. The question is not if we have to do it, it's just how fast is the change going to happen, right?
Exactly. And like we talked about earlier, it's a technology first approach because it's a people first approach, right? How are we going to make the lives of our engineers and our other stakeholders easier, so they can spend more time on what's important to them? And the change management piece is always very interesting because, like you said, all of us as humans are resistant to change in one way or another. But I found that if you can show kind of the roadmap and the steps along the way, right? Like step one isn't this complete digital disruption, right? It's taking your analog process or the old way of doing things, right, and just making it more streamlined, making it more efficient, so then you can spend time on what's important. So great points there, Marcel. And let's go back to the discussion about infrastructure, but failure specifically, right? So there's this talk about maintaining infrastructure in the built world, right? And it's kind of this almost binary state to the public, right? Either the thing works or it doesn't. And I think when it doesn't and failures get a lot of attention in the news, this is when this kind of discussion begins to happen, right? So how does digital transformation help with infrastructure, but failure of infrastructure in particular?
I mean, look, there's different ways on how you could go about it. I mean, if I would say what would be kind of my dream scenario, I think I think all the built world, all of infrastructure, bridges, tunnel, they should have like a TripAdvisor rating. So if you go to a city, you have all these bridges only have a 3-star rating or a 2-star rating, and the buildings have different ratings. So I think it needs a lot more visibility with real data points for the population to really start to appreciate things. I mean, if you think about it, it's crazy that we rate every pizza store at every corner, but there is no clean and easy to understand rating system of the biggest asset class in the world. If you think about it, it's madness, right? So I think that's an area that would be good. Once in a while there is sort of state of infrastructure reports going out, but it's probably rather the expert audience that are going to read and understand that. So is there a way to communicate to ultimately to the voters in a much clearer way that maybe some states or some cities do a better job than others, which may increase pressure on politicians, on authorities to do things in a different way? I think this could be a very interesting play if you think about it. How can we get the wider population behind understanding state of infrastructure, state of buildings, and that things can be done better or things can be done worse, that it really depends on leadership. So I think that would be kind of a point of arrival for me. If we would able to achieve that, then I think we would be all in a much better place, because all and everything is rated nowadays. But the biggest asset class in the world is not transparently rated, and it's madness, right? I mean, we mentioned at the beginning, all of the built world is 10 times bigger than all publicly listed companies, 10 times bigger. All publicly listed company of research reports, no end. But on the built world, you have no transparency and no clear information that people would understand. So I think that could be an interesting sort of approach or food for thought. Can we make this information more publicly available? Increase pressure on policymakers, on politicians, on authorities to take actions. Some food for thought here to maybe take a little bit of different approach to it. But that would be kind of my dream outcome. I don't know, in a couple of years down the road.
And for any of our entrepreneurial listeners, right? So think about the FHWA here in the United States, right? Assigns different ratings to bridges across the country. And I'm not a bridge expert, so this is just kind of my high level overview, right? But if you could, you could scrape that information and somehow convert it to a star rating, right? You could have a whole database of let's say metrics that are more easily understood by the public, rather than what I'd assume are these technical reports meant more by the professionals, right? That's just bridges. Now think about other, parking garages, other concrete structures, facades, where we're just now seeing the advent of laws that are requiring inspection, right? But I can see where you're going with this, because if all of that information is made available publicly, maybe a family and their children, right, don't want to park in this garage because they see,
Yep.
as they turn right on Google Maps, hey, it's a 1.5 out of 5 stars, I'm not parking there. And we see it all the time, right? And we try to educate our clients on what's best from a restoration and maintenance standpoint. But hey, getting the public that easily digestible information is definitely a good first step. But Marcel, you mentioned kind of before, right, this need to go and make things more easily understood, make repair, restoration of the built world faster, right? So artificial intelligence, a hot topic no matter what industry you're in, right? So poses a lot of potential, but I just like to get your opinion, right? Where do you see the use of artificial intelligence in the built world, and what do you think it can do for us long term in the future?
Look, our artificial intelligence, without any doubts, will be playing a more important role in the built world. But for artificial intelligence really to make a difference, you kind of need to get to a 90% plus kind of accuracy play. If you look at medical, probably in medical, we are at that level now that AI can do image analysis more reliable than a human. The difference there is a little bit, if you look at an X-ray image or an MRI image, that image was taken in a very, very controlled environment of the same type of humans, and you know, the autonomy of humans are well known. So it is not overly difficult to deliver consistent results. Now, if you look at the build world, you know, the possible configurations of columns and rebars and slabs and paintings and so on, it's a much, much more complex play to let AI really shine. We do achieve excellent results if you get very good images. You know, you can get to that 90+% accuracy, but oftentimes it fails because the input in terms of images or in terms of scans is poor. Then AI cannot do too much for you. The other challenge, obviously, with AI is you need a lot of contextual information, which we as humans or as engineers pick up very quickly. Okay, that's a column, and that's a column at the basement, and it's in the center, so probably it has the highest load, so that's the most critical one to look at. For an AI or a robot to do this automatically, that's probably still some years out there. We will get there 100%. Like we see in autonomous driving has made a lot of progress, but still also a way to go there. I would say today AI is more an assistant, a tool, maybe to make the life a little bit easier. We're not at the point yet that AI replaces the engineer or the experts, but it can be a second pair of eyes. It can help with efficiency, and therefore help you to do other things which maybe the human has to do and the AI cannot do. We do have an AI team very focused on a number of applications and working on big data and working on synthetic data modeling, etc., etc. But today it is an assistant to an expert, and it doesn't replace the expert yet. Will it eventually replace part of the expert world? Yes, I'm 100% sure, like it will with autonomous driving, right? I mean, if you look at the Uber play, right now they need the drivers. Eventually, they will not need the drivers anymore, but they still have served the same customer base. 10 years out, probably we're gonna see some of that in the built world. But it is an extremely complex subject because there is no unified design, same designs like we humans. We all have the same bone structure, and the heart all sits at the same place on every one of us. So MRI and X-ray on human images are relatively straightforward, to say so. On the build world, it is a bit more complex. It does require more time. But it will continue to be a companion to an expert and become a stronger and stronger companion over time, until we kind of hit that tipping point where AI can do things really independently and autonomously, and provide additional or more valuable information. The other thing, obviously, with AI, always to be careful about. Today, AI in infrastructure is oftentimes a little bit of brute force approach. Yes, you can scan a complete picture and take thousands of pictures and videographs and have then an AI cranking those images for hours and hours and hours. Not necessarily energy and resource efficient, nor cost efficient. So I think we also need to get to a point where AI is really, more cost efficient than deploying a human. So a number of challenges ahead. We'll get there. We'll take some time, but until then, let's use AI as a companion, as a helping hand where it makes sense, and keep growing it, right?
Absolutely. And right, maybe one of the sometimes the slower moving things, right, than construction is law, right? And in the United States, at least, right, the law still relies on a professional engineer's judgment. Ultimately, they're signing and sealing, right? So as of today, there is no replacing the engineer, nor should there be, because of the way our laws are structured, right? So behind that AI needs to be an engineer's judgment to say, I've looked, I understand, and the interpretation of the data given to me is correct within reason, right? So, and that's where I say where the fears of technology replacing engineering are just they're not anywhere near today, and I don't think they ever should be, right? Because we still rely on human judgment and intuition among a number of things to keep the built world operating as it is.
You mentioned a very good point, laws. I mean, we work in other parts of the world where, for drone inspection to get certified, your company needs to have an AI image recognition or defect recognition on images engine that is 80% accurate. Otherwise, you are not going to be certified as a drone inspector. Which I think is a quite a progressive and an aggressive way to push technology and making sure companies start to be innovative. But also there, it's the 80% hurdle. So it doesn't replace the human, because 80% accuracy still means you need to look through all the images. But for a lot of them, you can say, yep, the AI did it correctly. Oh no, here it missed something. So it is more a productivity push, if you wish, than a replace the human push. But what I found interesting with that approach is it really pushes engineering firms to deploy technology and be innovative and finding new ways to do things. So laws and regulation can be used in a smart way to push technology and to push new approaches. Oftentimes not appreciated by the industry, but if done in a smart way, it can absolutely be helpful to drive innovation and to drive new thinking in an industry, right?
Absolutely. And right. And regardless of what you as the individual think of technology, right, it'll play out, and there's going to be just like in everything, right? There's going to be proponents, there's going to be opponents, and it's just going to be a very fascinating next number of years to just see what comes of it, and really how it changes our day to day. But Marcel, with that being said, it's been a pleasure. Do you have any final words of wisdom for our audience here today?
Well, never be afraid of change. Adopt technology. Live in the future, not in the past. I think this is important for all of us, and enjoy life to the fullest.
Absolutely right, and that's what we work for, right? It's just a better world for everyone. And Marcel, what's the best way for our listeners to connect with you? Right, we know you're active on LinkedIn. Any other places they can find you?
I think LinkedIn is sort of my place to go on social media. I'm not all that big on all the other platforms, so happy to connect with anyone on LinkedIn. I think that's probably the easiest one to reach out. I mean, shoot me a message if you want to connect. Always happy to debate and connect on social media, right? Yes, absolutely.
And if you'd like a good debate with Marcel, just ask him about iOS versus Android. That's always a good one in the comments section. But again, thank you, Marcel, and to our listeners, right? We are here to help you, so please reach out to Marcel, reach out to myself, or to the great folks here at EMI, and we're gonna try to help you in any way we can. But Marcel, again, thank you for your time, and it's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks a lot, and great show you put together here.
Absolutely. All right. Till next time, everyone. Thank you. Please remember, you can find the show notes for this episode at aectechpodcast.com. There, you'll find a summary of the key points discussed in today's episode, as well as links to any of the resources, websites, or books mentioned during the episode. Until next time, I wish you all the best in all of your engineering and technology endeavors. Thank you.